And what we first start off with is this runtime. So when we process the Ruby code or we process Python code, it goes to a set of binders. And the binders are responsible for figuring out what to do with it. And the two things on either side are the call sites and the rules. So the call sites effectively are a caching mechanism. So if we're doing a loop, we don't want to necessarily interpret the loop every single time. There may be things that aren't for that. So we can cache those calls to help improve performance. And the rules help figure out when we cache and when we don't, because obviously there are times when you don't want to do that either. So the rules are what allow the behavior to figure out when to cache and when not to. The next thing is, of course, the more interesting part, which is the language implementation. The language context is what the language context is. It's the language and everything about it. The compiler is what's responsible for taking that, parsing it, and into the abstract syntax trees, which are then used by the DLR compiler to access the CLR. And lastly, we have the common hosting model. And so these are the various methods or various objects that you would use if you're hosting IronRuby as part of your application. So enough about slides. Let's look at some integration points that we have with our application. Oops. OK. So the first is calling .NET from IronRuby. So we've seen what we're able to do with calling .NET from IronRuby. Oh, darn, that's what I was going to do. I was going to save the translator for this part, so you all have already seen it. That's OK. So then, so we'll just briefly talk about what's in this code. So you see at the top we have require system Windows forms. So what that's including is that system Windows forms.rb file, which includes the strongly typed name system Windows forms DLL. And then this is the syntax that we use, system : Windows : forms. And we can bypass that syntax by just saying include system Windows forms. And now we can just say messagebox.show. So pretty straightforward. And the other thing, of course, in Ruby is that we don't need any of the parentheses at all. So we can make it say talker.talk. And all this would still work. So pretty straightforward of what we're doing with .NET from IronRuby. Now, if we want to call IronRuby from .NET, so this is if we want to actually host IronRuby. So Shay Friedman, whose books I have up here, and if you want one, just see me afterwards, has an example of an integration called extendable app. So this is called monodevelop. Look, it's C# code. Aren't we all excited? I don't know who's VB.NET in here who's like, no, boo. So what he has done here is created a form which allows you to test out, what dynamic language hosting looks like. So I'll show you the form first. So this is pretty straightforward. No dynamic language at all. We can just say send. It says hello, Corey. But if we click at extensions, we have this extensions writer. And what this is doing is allowing us to dynamically execute code inside of our Windows Forms app. And we're doing this using either IronRuby or IronPython syntax. So I'm going to say hello form.name text box. And if I save and close this and I click send again, it'll say hello system Windows Forms text box. All right. So what we need to do is say .text. Save and close. Send again. Hello Corey from IronRuby extension. So how this works behind the scenes is pretty straightforward. So if we look at the rest of the application here, it's a standard Windows Forms app. So we have a form class. It's got text boxes. It's got, yay, whatever. And if we look at the extension form itself, again, nothing special except for he's setting some default Ruby code. The power of this comes in the extension runner. Let me close this out here. So first we start by saying including Microsoft.scripting.hosting, IronRuby, IronPython hosting, and the Microsoft scripting. So these are the classes which allow you to to run either IronPython or IronRuby code as a part of your class. If we scroll down a little bit here, there we go. We'll see how we did that is by this script scope. So we create a script scope and a script engine, and we can either create a Ruby engine or a Python engine. And so here he's just doing a swap between them. And we're actually passing variables into that engine. So of course, when we create the IronRuby context, it doesn't have access to our variables because it's a whole different thing. But what we can do here within this scope is pass in variables that then are accessible from our IronRuby code. We say engine create script source from string, which is a very interesting evaluation statement, if you will, and then turn around and get the return value out of it. But if you notice, we're not setting the form text box or anything. All of that was done from the Ruby code because we're passing the reference to our objects to Ruby, and Ruby's actually executing against those objects that are part of it. So that is a pretty interesting scenario for just hosting the code in whatever this is, 40 lines of code. Suddenly you're able to host Ruby in as part of that. A good scenario for thinking about why in the world you want to do this, and not just for saying, oh, we can make our app insanely dangerous and they can access anything, is thinking about from configuration. So I was talking yesterday or last night to somebody who works for a company which pushes out a lot of software. And they have a XML scripting language that they use. And any of us who have worked with XML, now that 2003 is over and it's not as exciting, know that that is a very painful thing. Like he was saying, well, we can only have 3 nested if loops. And nested if loops in XML? I don't even want to think about that. But what we can do with this is instead say, here, let's put our configuration files inside of Ruby. Like, let's write them in Ruby. And with this, with the ability to be very expressive of what we're doing, suddenly it makes more sense for those people who have to go in and edit these. Now, you have to be cautious because you have a lot of powerful, you've got a scripting language you're writing with in that context. But it still becomes a very interesting use case. So the last thing I want to show you is Silverlight integration. Mixed 10, OK. Silverlight Scripts. So I wasn't going to do a Twitter app, but apparently that is the new Hello World. And when I saw it at the keynote, I didn't have a choice but to do that. So here is our Hello World Twitter application. And you'll see what it does is it goes and it searches Twitter, and it fades in and out. It keeps it up there for 10 seconds. It pops up, pulls our image. Fair note, I am not actually hitting Twitter. I was, and I found out Twitter rate limited the conference about 5 minutes before my talk started. So I swapped this to, luckily I had a file cached, but I can show you where the code is that swaps this out. But this is Silverlight that we're running. This isn't some magic. This is Silverlight. We're going right through the .NET framework, and we're turning around and able to spit it out, do all of our, so we're doing animations here in Silverlight, and we're controlling all of that code through Ruby. So let me show you what that Ruby code looks like. OK. So first I'll start with our XAML. So the XAML is pretty straightforward. We have a couple of storyboards that we use for timers. And then we have our grid of the root. So we're just doing the layout here is what we're effectively doing. And then we have the interesting part. So we define